firstly, it's overwhelming and wonderful to see so many people here interested in this kaupapa. It's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, who comes to us from Chestnut Hill College in Philadelphia, and she can tell you the rest because that's not the only place she's from, as you will quickly discover. Anna is an associate professor in that place. Anna and I have kind of a longer history than tonight. We first encountered one another when I was doing my PhD and interested in these ideas. And I came across the name of this woman, Anna Marjanovic-Shane, who had written a piece called Pretend You're a Pig, I think it was.
Yes.
Something like
Brian,
that.
you're a pig.
Yeah,
not you, Brian, but another Brian.
Yeah, Brian, you're a pig. And I wanted to find out more about her work, but of course her PhD wasn't in English, so I kind of couldn't. I couldn't find it anywhere. So
it was not published, but it was in English.
It wasn't available at the time. I could not get my hands on it. And then, fortunately for me, when Eugene marked my thesis, he was able to say to Anna, there's this woman in New Zealand who's quoting you. And so we were kind of connected in that way. And from that time when I actually did get a chance to look at Anna's PhD, it was as if we'd been in the same room talking to one another from across the world. So it was absolutely remarkable. And since that time we've been communicating by Skype and email and all sorts of things, and she can tell you more about that shortly. So it's my particular pleasure to have her here with us today and to introduce you to some of the ideas that she brings around play. So I won't say any more about that. Anna's going to speak for about 50 minutes maybe, followed by hopefully about 20 minutes dialogue if we have time, and then we'll close the formal proceedings, and if people wish to, they can join us at 7:45 at Iguana, which is on 203 Victoria Street. I should also say that this session is going to be panoptoed. Is it turned on, Bridget?
Yes, I just turned it on.
Okay. So that will be available on the Early Years website if people are wanting to follow it up with others who would get the opportunity to be here. So, Anna, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm tremendously happy to finally be in New Zealand, with which it seems I have multiple connections, some of them not even known to me for a long time until very recently, like melodies of the songs that I knew when I was a child. And we, in my summer camp, went to, created a hymn for ourselves, which went like this, la 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 la. But we also had our own words, and I didn't know that it was the Rotorua song. Now I know. So that's kind of like very funny story. And then the second connection of mine with New Zealand is, of course, a man who was very important in my development. It was my advisor, Brian Sutton Smith, of whose name you probably have heard, and if not, he was a great ethnographer of play who was from Wellington in New Zealand, but his most career was developed in the United States. And that was the Brian, you are the pig, because for a long time I could not get across my message, what I think about the difference between saying a real metaphor and playing, which I thought was very different. So when I told him, if I tell you, Brian, you're a pig, for real, you may be insulted, but if I say you're a pig and I'm a big bad wolf, then we are playing and you don't have a reason to be insulted. Then he figured out, started to think about that. So that's why that title in that publication. And so having said that, I really am interested in what you would say and think. So please write your questions, but keep them for after I finish, because we can easily go sidetracks. I'm very sidetracky person and can go in different directions. Okay, so I gave this title to my presentation, an ontological dialogic approach to play, which is all tentative really. But the reason for that is that I want to look at play in a little bit different way than it's a contemporary, very usual way to look at play in education and in developmental psychology. And that would be, again, from Brian Sutton Smith, only one type of rhetoric, the progressivist rhetoric of children's play, that play is for development. Well, there are 7 others that he mentions in his book, and I won't go into that. I also have to do it both places so that I have my notes here on my computer. I will start with a small story that happened in my life, and most of my data about the beginning of my interest in play start with my children and my nephews, or nephew. So this is a story about my nephew that illustrate, which I will use to illustrate or to show how I mean ontological dialogic point of play. So it was his 3rd birthday, and he was the only child at that time, and we all lived in the same apartment, my parents and me and my brother and sister-in-law and Jovan, which was a small apartment, but at that time in Belgrade it was normal. And he was the only child, and he was like a focus of everything that we were doing. And at that time I was a student at the University of Belgrade and had much more time than his parents to play with him and to spend a lot of time with him. So by his 3rd birthday, he and I were real buddies and really much closer, let's say, than his mother and him or father. Probably in a different way, but we were the pals. We were like, I don't know. We lived for each other. So in this setting, on his 3rd birthday, it was all adults. His parents, grandparents on both sides, great uncles and aunts, and he was the only child running happily about. And at one moment of silence, my uncle, his great uncle, said that ominous question, says, "Who do you love the best?" And now he was caught and said, first he said, "Nobody." And then he suddenly came to me and pulled my head down and whispered in my ear, "You are nobody. You are nobody." And that was exactly May 1st, 1978, a long time ago when you think about it. So I want to now start with my analysis and my approach that was not developed then, but using this story to start talking about what I'm still very much in development and the tentative. And when I say play as postupok, it's a Slavic word which means act, deed. Sometimes it means something big, to a very big human decision to do something, let's say, to help somebody at the expense of losing something yourself. But sometimes it can, especially in my language, can mean everyday little decisions, how you treat other people, what you do with other people, how everything that you do can change and shape the relationship. And like in this, when he came to say to me, "You are nobody," he said something very important to me, that it's not true that he doesn't like anybody the best. There was somebody who he liked the best. So he felt that need to create somehow, not to insult me. First, he didn't want to insult anybody else, especially in a family where it's an unusual thing to not say mom and dad. Okay, so let me just do it this way so I can see better what I'm doing. I think of a play seen through this lens, through Bakhtinian point of view, as every kind of a relation, deed or act toward another, addressed to another person, changes something. It has some kind of addressivity and some kind of responsibility. But in play, maybe somehow something special may happen. So I see it that when play starts, it's an invitation for for self and for other to come into a certain different relationship, maybe a relationship that's double-binded or different. I'm not quite sure how to completely talk about it, but it's a pretend. A pretend is something that's not for real, so it's not part of my real intention. So you can say that that time is taken out of the actual relating to people. You can always say, no, 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 that was just pretend, it was not for real. But it still allows you to test with others your ideas, your desires, to do something to them in this kind of like masked way, maybe. But at the same time, it is a deliberate act. It's not something that just happens because it's a flow of life, but something that is done in a deliberate way. When you say, let's play, let's pretend, it's an invitation. That could be said, or it could be done with some kind of exaggeration, or just something that seems unusual and not in its place. It immediately creates this ability to say that that's something different, it's about something else, maybe. And one of the earliest people who talked about play from maybe that point of view, I'm not quite sure, and it was in the 30s, it was Huizinga. I don't know how familiar is that name to everyone, who said that play has its own sphere, it's something completely in itself, resist analysis based on anything, can be reduced to anything else, and we should be looking at play in its own right as something that people do and live with, not because they learn something, not because they create social relationship, learn to be more social and not, but because it's a way of being. And I started thinking about this difference of way of being with others in the everyday common life, that in which we are just thrown in and things happen, and this deliberateness of play as a moment in which that there is something that splits or bifurcates. There is suddenly this imaginary or some pretend thing going on. At the same time, life does not stop there at all. So there is some kind of relationship between one and the other. So I want to look at play as being ontologically significant, as Huizinga said, that it's an absolutely primary category of life, familiar to everybody at a glance, right down to the animal level, which some people may agree or disagree, but I want to start with that. That's something primary that happens right there from the very beginning of being human, maybe not only human, but I would like to say human. I also think that play is significant for the players, and that in that sense, when we look at play, we have to look at what the players themselves are understanding as play, not what we think play is, and impose our own explanation. And that we can see in looking at play from different cultural points of view, that sometimes what's seen as play in one culture may not be seen as play in another culture. But to turn the lens from looking from the player's point of view, if the players or people who live together participate in some events, think of it as play, well, however they define that, then that would be maybe a criterion to say that something happens as we would try to call play. It could be for many different reasons. It's very hard to decide what play is aiming at for the players. Sometimes it's for fun. Many people think it's for fun. It's for pleasure. It's just attractive thing to do. People love to do that. Nobody has to tell them to do that. In fact, it could be having an opposite effect if people are forced to play or being told to play. But sometimes play is, and that was something that was very much stressed by Brian Sutton Smith, that play very often is about dangerous things, things that are daring, and not pleasant at all. He always used to say about the game that he and his friends played here in New Zealand, daring each other who can put their face closest to a cat that somebody was holding by the tail. That's a New Zealand play, kind of like boys' play. And so nobody can say that it's a very pleasant thing, but it's still not reality in a sense that it's kind of like done as an everyday thing of life. It's like playing with danger. So also Brian Sutton Smith thought that play, various ways of playing are various ways of exploring, exercising different kind of experiences, feelings, and ways to relate to life, so that we can't talk only about one type of thing that happens in play or for one particular reason. It's very elusive in that sense. So you could say that maybe play is more a mode of being together in a certain way than what you are doing together, but that there is this mode change there. I would say also that I see play as creating ambiguities. Those are the acts that can be answered in many different ways and many different positions. Like, for instance, in that vignette that I said at the beginning, when Jovan said, you are nobody, if you understand that as a metaphoric, I love you, as a playful way to say that, using that I love nobody, or it could be understood that in a completely different way. If you think of the same metaphor that was done by Odysseus, when he says to the Cyclops asks, who are you? Who are you that I can say to my kin who blinded me? And he said, I am nobody. So you say, nobody blinded me. So that's for a completely different, it's on the surface similar rhetoric, but it's then for completely different reasons that are not playful at all. So understood in that way, play can be seen as a critical human practice and I would say also praxis. The difference, I would say, that play is evolving, that it doesn't have a preset outcomes. Even plays with rules like sports and chess are always a contest without knowing the outcome, and just because you don't know it is so attractive to test, but if everything is known in advance, then it's not play, or it's probably very boring to do that. So I still would try to keep analyzing what happens there. And I would say that at the beginning, that moment of transitioning into play, of saying let's pretend, or in any other different way saying let's pretend when the play starts, that it creates multiple realities, as I mentioned before. Many other people have noticed that. They talk about imaginary situation, like in Vygotsky's work, and then looking at what happens in the imaginary and its a relationship to reality. I would call that as a essentialist maybe, and also epistemological way of looking at play that is now coming into, or already came into, a lot of our psychological, developmental, and educational ways of thinking about play. Because the thing is, if you look at that imaginary situation as a simulator for real life, which is not a new idea, that in play people learn and prepare for the future, or create new concepts in play for the today and future. So it's looking at the learning skills or concepts in these imaginary situations where it's possible, or it's you can do things that you cannot do in reality for different reasons, either dangerous or you just can't. You can't be a mother when you're 3 years old, But maybe you want to prepare for being a mother or something like that. Or other people were talking about the reasons for play, like from Freud and through also Vygotsky, as fulfilling desires that cannot be fulfilled in the reality. So instead of doing something for real, then you do this, okay, we will just play and imagine things. Or you can think about these multiple realities in terms of Bason, who talked about play as creating play frames, which is also a cognitive way of looking. In a sense, everything that happens within, after I say let's pretend, should not be interpreted in the same way as ordinary. So Bason was talking about the animal play, about the dog bite. When the dogs nibble each other, it's not a real bite. It stands for a real bite, but because ostensibly the dogs are playing, they understand that they shouldn't be really attacking each other. Of course, that may also happen with the rough and tumble play, and probably the play with those cats pull tail, when things can become suddenly slip into the actual real danger, and with all these risky plays. So how far, where is that boundary, that frame that Bason is talking about, whether it's there or not, how porous it is, where is this ambiguity, who is going to interpret something as being playful or not playful. I'll a little bit later tell another story from some other research about how these frames, or I would say boundaries rather than frames, play a very significant role in deciding, and who is deciding how to interpret what. But I would like to use the Bakhtinian notion of a chronotope instead of imaginary situation or a frame, play frame, because also I don't see only two, that's one thing, and also I think the Bakhtinian notion of a chronotope provides a more analytic way of looking from the player's point of view, and also of looking at the boundaries and how one and the other and the third, and I'll mention those chronotopes that I see, maybe you see more or less, reflect maybe at each other, or on these boundaries create changes for each other. So chronotope is a unity of time, space, and axiology in the sense of values that are for the participants there, what's right and wrong, what's good and bad, what's appropriate, not appropriate, what do you do there. So in that sense, time and space are not quantitative entities, but qualitative entities. It's not time that you can measure by the clock, but it's time to do something, like it's time for dinner now, it's time for a class now, or it's time for a war now, if it's a or it's our classroom environment between two rings of the bell in the primary school, something like that. And Bakhtin thought about time as really being probably more defining of space or not. For instance, when he talked about the Greek love novels or adventure, Greek adventure novels, the time between, usually it's two people fall in love and at the end two people marry, but in between there could be so many adventures, things about Odysseus, for instance, that you don't know where it's going to go. It's unpredictable, but at the end when they meet back again, they are probably the same age, and everything happens in between. So chronotope is not something that I want to use as a description of the reality, but just exactly in the Bakhtinian sense as a concept that helps us conceptualize what's going on. So if I say that in play that the imaginary chronotope is almost like carving out the time of the real, I don't think that really happens. It's just my conceptual way of trying to figure that out. And I think it's also not mine or yours, but the players have to feel like that. I don't know if you ever had such situations in life where you fell into some play and it looked like it went for ages, and then you suddenly found out it was like 3 minutes or something like that. So there was a completely different feeling of time and what's going on there than in the everyday rut of the time in which we are thrown. The space can become something completely different in the sense that you see the space not again in the physical meters or feet or something, but in what that space affords. This is a space of a big battle or a space of an earthquake or something that has a meaning for you. There are many other books about space, which is interesting but not important at this moment. So I would like to then describe these different realities, and I want to call them all realities because I think all the chronotopes for the players internally have the feeling of a reality. But what they ascribe to that, is it pretend or is it for real, or is it within a friends or enemies? It depends on that, what status for the players these chronotopes have. But internally they may have the same things going on or the same axiologies going on. So chronotop also enables us to talk about the time-space value of an event, not of the universals, like when we Kantian categories of time and space and things in principle, but of uniqueness of the moment that's going on, and a uniqueness of the play or uniqueness of what's going on in play for the players. And with that, it also invites us to think about experience, how people experience, or again, this is a Russian or Slavic word, perezhivanie, in the sense not just getting experience like having a lot of skills learned in play, but how you live through certain things that happen in play, in life, in any thing. So if you cry at the end of the movie that you watched that was very sad, then you could say you had lived through that experience for you, and it aroused your full participation and emotions, so you perezhivanie that, perezhivate that. So in that sense, chronotopes have dramatic quality, all of them. That something happens that's important, that's memorable, that's something about which you can talk, either in life or in imaginary chronotopes. So from these points of view, I want to talk about play. So these are the ones that I think that I can abstract that happened when people start to play and when they are playing. I think that there are special relationship between people who play, want to play with each other, accept each other to play. So I call that a community of players chronotope. It's not the same as everybody in the world or everybody in your class, but you have maybe best friends or a circle of friends, or you want to even play with strangers. But once you start playing with them, you create a different kind of relationship, I think. But maybe some people would not agree. It's a more close relationship. Maybe it's only for the time of the play, but while that lasts, it's a relationship of people who collaborate together. I'll talk about it in the next slide. Then I think about the reality chronotope, and I think about the reality chronotope as not something that you just live through everyday life, but specially constructed because of play, for the players. And I'll talk about it more on the next slide. And then I talk about imaginary chronotope. That's the one that everybody very quickly sees as being a play because something pretend is going on, or some special rules are there, like in a sports game or in a pretend play. And then, of course, we have, or don't have to have, the chronotope of audience. People who are observers, who are just next there. Children and adults play in a different way when they're alone and when there is audience. There is a different orientation of the players, whether they are playing for each other or for the audience or with the audience that's out there, and how you can, so it's awareness there. Of course, people can be audience for each other as players, but I mean it more as people who are passers-by or observers or teachers or adults or anybody, if it's an adult play, anybody else who is not part of that play. Sometimes people blush when you just discovered somebody walks on your play that you didn't mean to play like that. So there is this feeling of tension that audience changes something in the play. For whatever reason, sometimes you need the audience because you need the judges to say who won or something like that. They are not playing, they are observing and can see things from another point of view that's also sometimes important for play. And so I want to talk here about this boundary moment of transition to come to analyze this little episode that I said at the beginning. So Jay or Jovan is put on the spot to declare his feelings. He does not want to hurt anyone. To avoid the straight answer, he declares nobody, and then he realizes that even that might hurt someone's feelings, and that becomes the material for his reality chronotope, because that now sets up the whole play. It's not the whole reality, everything in his life, but this kind of particular relationships that now are highlighted, about which he wants to respond. This doesn't have to to be set up in that chronological way. It can be in a different way. But I just want to say that a reality chronotope is part of the play itself. It's actually because of the play highlighted and becomes seen as real part that either is the play is about or the play reacts to that in some way, but it's definitely not the imaginary part or pretend part, but still is something special. So it's not just like everyday living that exists in which anything can happen, but some kind of a focus of play. Then the act did his postupoks. He creates a language game and a community of players with me. When he comes to me, we are isolated. He just whispers to my ear so nobody can hear. So we are that little community of players. And then he playfully says, "You are nobody." Okay, so that's the pretend there, as I see, and that little play with me so nobody else would hear. And there I have all three that I see chronotopes. There is, of course, an audience that should be excluded in this point because he wants nobody else to hear that, what he said. But they are there. So he has to whisper to just me. So I already said that. So that the reality chronotope is not just any given reality, but the reality chronotope does not pre-exist play. It's born in the moment of play as a focus or a reaction. Or if you think of play as being a carnivalesque or teasing other people, at that moment when somebody's teasing you about your big nose, let's say, for Cyrano de Bergerac, that's that reality that becomes part of the play of teasing, not anything else in particular. So for the participants, it belongs to this realm of each one's ongoing experience in the past, present, even future, but it's part of the play. Oh, sorry, I'm working on two computers and didn't at the same time. Okay. So I want to talk about this relational boundary between the reality chronotope and the play chronotope in terms of Bakhtin, who talks about chronotope as a thickening of the moment, thickening of time. And that's exactly what I said. The reality chronotope and the imaginary chronotope sort of support each other in the contrast to each other to be something existing. And at the same time, the deed or the postupok of play is, in Jane's words, alteric. It's transformational for the relationships. play is always transformational for the relationship in the sense that we're doing something to each other for the real relationships of the players, because if not, then nothing happens. So I think that players always in some way have to surprise each other from that boundary, from something that's not completely clear, is it play or not, or it is clear but it's still very interesting because it could be interpreted in many different ways. So that's what I wanted to say. That play then, imaginary chronotop of play and the reality chronotop somehow support each other, and are always that fine line. Let's say I always go back to that Brian Sutton Smith, back to that cat's fine line between being really daring and being actually scratched by a cat's foot. When it dissolves, the play then dissolves and becomes too dangerous. But at the same time, people who relate to each other, when they play with each other, have a way to relate to each other in many new ways and to test each other's boundaries also. So that it's a new arena for the players to test what their relationship is about and how far they could go. So it doesn't have to be adversarial. It could be also, again, it's very hard to talk about play in generalities. But if you go back to the episode with Jovan, it's like exactly about how to say that there is such a relationship under these circumstances, and how to test that whether that will be understood or out. So the tensions always exist between the players and between the players both as in imaginary chronotop, where they create different personas as themselves, and the real tensions that come from their relationships in reality. It's just another way how to play with these tensions, play with the possibility of resolving and creating new surprises and new ways, constantly elusive. And that's also in sports, in pretend play, in chess, always like, what's your next move? And as soon as I think that I have solved this, the whole situation can change into a new move that somebody else offers or myself. So that element of constant testing is, I see it there. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just looking at some things and not the others. All right. Well, this is just reiterating basically what I want to say, that I don't see imaginary chronotop and the reality chronotop as a map and territory that is very present in Vygotskian way of looking for the universals, for representation from the point of view of epistemology, concept development or skill development, but exactly in this tension between players, that through the experiences, through what people do to each other and deeds that they do. I also want to talk about this evolvement of constant construction, that the outcomes of anything are not completely known, and that includes construction of the personas, both the imaginary and the actual selves. Like sometimes you surprise yourself too, what you can do through play that you never knew that. So it could be testing of self, and it could be also testing of others, or it could be nothing. It could amount to nothing. But it's just that there are constant initiatives that can change the flow, sometimes the rules, and also what we always know, there's constant negotiation and going back and forth between playing it out and negotiating it. Whether sometimes this negotiation and playing out can go within play, because you're just changing what you're doing and offering new ways, but sometimes people have to stop and clarify what they are doing. And children do that as adults too. Sometimes the play can stop because of that, because there is too much disagreement and negotiation, or too much surprise, or people just can't figure out. Another episode that's not here that I was analyzing with Jane for another paper is a play with my son, who at that time was about 2.5 or 3 years, and I said, let me be your daughter and you will be my son. So okay, he agreed that, and so I was cuddling as if I was a little girl with him, and then at one moment I put my finger in my nose like that, and he stopped and says, girls don't pick their nose. And I said, how do you know that? But we are not playing now, we're talking. He says, I never saw that. So I said, well, what do you think if you didn't see something that it doesn't exist? Then he thought, and then he says, then I'm getting out of that no-stick city, which we play now, it's a street. And so then he started with me, and I said, like, what kind of city is a no-stick city? He says, where people pick their noses. And he's going to get it. And I said, everyone picks their noses, even adults? And he says, no, adults never pick their noses. And that was the end of it. He wouldn't play that anymore. So you can see how there was a lot of negotiation inside and outside, and figuring out who is doing what to whom, trying back to be playful, getting out of that. So there was a lot of these initiatives. So I also want to say that even though it sometimes seems that players create characters that are different from themselves, like let's play doctor, or let's play mother, or let's play teacher, I think that players create characters that are themselves in the role of that. How I would be a mother, not any mother. How I would be a doctor, and not any doctor, or whatever else let's play. Also, of course, in sports play and chess, people don't even pretend that they're somebody else. They are just playing as themselves. But I think always it's about people who are themselves, not others. How I would feel that, how I would do, what would I do in that situation, what would be my answer. So it's really about I don't even want to say stretching, about being in another way with somebody else as you, even though in the role of whatever people are pretending. I think rather than developing personas in the imaginary chronotop of play, it just opens the possibilities for players themselves to act in certain ways. And by creating such boundaries of their own selves, to discover who they are or might become. That might be different from theater, but it depends on what school of theater. Like, for instance, for Stanislavski School of Theater, this would be the real way to act, to find out your own personal experience and feeling from something that you experience in your life, and then to create the role of somebody else, but from you. But that's not true in the, let's say, British way of teaching acting or something like that. So it depends on how people are schooled and what they believe, whether that's true or not. And finally, I want to talk about the community of players chronotop, which I think is very important in terms of how people relate to each other, and that probably should be at the beginning rather than at the. It's not the end yet, but not as a third. So I think that this relationship between players is of a twofold in a way. Because at one hand, they have to create this imaginary reality and have a lot of negotiation about that. So they are co-authoring that. Nobody can say that, even I think when people are solitary playing, there are imaginary people with whom they're playing and responsible or answerable to these imagined people, playing because or just because or in spite of or somebody there. But when people are playing together, There is a double bind in keeping the ball in the air, let's say, and not dropping it, and at the same time developing all these surprises and initiatives that can constantly turn something over, and always on the brink of being interpreting something as play, postupok, or not play postupok. Is it a real hostility or pretend hostility, or both, or neither? So it's a very precarious position, and that's what I think creates this closeness I used to call intimate. In a way, it could be intimacy, but maybe that's a too strong term to talk about that as intimacy. So creating this mutual relationship that are testing their friendships, their respect, their intentions, where are you going to, even adversarial perspectives that could emerge, because you can hit somebody and say, I'll just pretend. And so then is it taken as just pretend or not? There is a test of another person. Or if it is, or it's maybe yes, maybe not, how then that will change and where it will go. But the need to keep the imaginary, keep the play going because of the fun of play is almost binding for all the players. Because if you can't keep that, you are out of play in some way, or you're spoiling the play. You are the one who puts so much adversary that people can't decide anymore what to play, and spoiling the play, so it stops. So it's a very elusive thing that at the same time, when you can be enemies, or you can do various surprising and testing things within the imaginary chronotop. As community of players, you have to collaborate in some ways. You have to find ways to stay or to leave play. And that changes then the whole situation. So this dual orientation creates this special value system, and that's why I call it a different chronotop, because it's not the same value system by which you would measure, very metaphorically say, other people who are not players. It creates this unique expectations by which the players can evaluate both each other's relational postupoks or deeds on the boundary between playing and not playing, and also each other's contribution to the, like when you have a good player, it's real fun to play. It's sometimes very boring to play with people who are not good players. So it's kind of like a contribution, how well that play is played in every sense. And those two can be in contradiction with each other too. So it creates this, I would say, chronotopical difference, because within people who are playing, you're creating this special way of relating to each other. Maybe I'm wrong. So I want to now talk about this. I mentioned before about creating ambiguities, and that was not so very clear in the first example. But this example is from a very recent book by Ivy Shusbo that she called Evil Play. And you can read, I can tell you. So these three girls have decided to play doctor. One is 4 years old, and she's the doctor. Eve, likewise, is 4, and she's the mother. And little Maria, who is 2, is the sick child. And the game is well underway, and all sorts of exciting incidents occur. A new climax is introduced. The little one is to take some medicine. The big one provides it. They pee in a soda water bottle. This action and its result takes one of the girls out of the game. Isn't it nasty, she asks? The other one plays trump. But it's the medicine. Otherwise you would die. The urine is forgotten as urine, and the girls are pleased with the impressive and lifelike medicine. It should be bad tasting. It should be dangerous, because it's the medicine. And the fear of the little one is good for play too. Right? Now the little one is to take its medicine, and she must be coaxed into taking it. Here you are, Maria. Here is your soda pop. They say in very sweet voices. To their blank surprise, the little one refuses to even touch the bottle. However, that does not stop the game. The big one recovers from their surprise. It fits well into the game that the little one refuses to take her medicine. That also happens in the real world. It's not supposed to be easy. And the big ones appeal and threaten long with the framework of the game. Yum! It's soda water. I wish it was mine. You are the only one to take a. You are only to take a sip. Otherwise, you'll get ill. And so we see this ambiguity and these boundary conditions when in real life something could be really very adversarial, insulting, bad, physically dangerous or something. But in play, it fits the play and how one comes into another and supports the other or reflects off of each other. I really think that's one of the very good examples. It's very hard to find good examples where you can see highlighted things that are very elusive and emergent, and I think that in this one it was very well highlighted. So if you think of the boundary between imaginary and the reality chronotop, the boundaries of player established because of this breakdown that you saw in what we are going to do. This what the two little girls who peed in the soda bottle. That's an alteric postupok or a deed that changes everything. Little one stopped playing. She was not playing anymore. While they saw that her reaction not as not playing but as fitting very well into play. Because you're supposed to be scared, you're supposed to don't like medicine and things like that. So, of course, imaginary chronotop takes a focus on a particular actual problem or issue or aspect of mutual concern for the players and establish it as the reality focus of the chronotop. And it says at the same time some kind of a comment or some kind of an answer or some kind of a response to the reality. They were playing about these doctors and also I want to say that sometimes it's carnivalesque in the sense that you are really teasing or really breaking down the rules of making fun of everything and doing it in deliberate way that's not that is in play but at the same time is saying a lot about the real opinions or doing something, not saying about, but doing something to others who are supposed to then take it with a grain of salt and say, okay, ha ha ha. There is also, if you think about the boundaries between the community of players and the reality chronotop, there is this relational breakdown. What you're doing in changing relationships with others is both in and out of the community of players, which I already said. So the relationships of testing each other's subjectivities, relationship of mutual delight in co-authoring, relationship of co-authoring a world of mutual significance and concern, all of that is right at the boundaries, I think, between the community of players chronotop and the reality chronotop. And what is it? So, I'm ready to ask questions.
Perfect timing.
Did
we
I?
have about 15-20 minutes for discussion. If anybody would like to ask Anna a question or share an insight or perhaps a provocation.
I wrote down questions as I went through, but I kept going back to the same question of what is play.
Yeah,
And,
I would like to know
I
too.
remember situations where I was visiting my former in-laws when my little girl was just this tall, and this staunch conservative businessman was I heard him behind the door playing with her on the ground with her with toys, and that was play. And I didn't interrupt because I knew, being the audience, I would spoil that whole situation. So that's play. But then in the evening time, he's in the corner with his whiskey and cigar and his newspaper in the lounge, to where the distant wife is in the kitchen with the daughters having a laugh and enjoying themselves. And it struck me that that's play as well. They're playing the part. And then it's not a boundary between the imaginary chronotope and the reality one. It's a dialectic more
Or dialogic in between the two.
I mean, both were since, you know, they're both playing once playing a role, and they renegotiated when they stopped and clarified. I guess that was when they got divorced.
Which is for real, right? It's very hard. I'm also all that I said is very tentative, you know, because it's. I'm trying to create some kind of principles, but again, there are so many different instances that. And I think that maybe the best thing would say it's about the mode, not about what's going on, but in what way it's going on. Maybe that would be the most universal thing to say.
I have conversations with teachers often about children's play that they may deem not so appropriate. So particularly around superhero type play, and it can appear to be, on the surface, not particularly productive or exclusive of others, and so I'm it's interesting for me to be able to go back and talk about, and we have had conversations about the context of what the play is creating for the players. So it's not the story as such, but it's the negotiations that is happening within it, or it's the play itself, and how players can be in real, they can be maybe timid and shy, and you go into a different play and become confident and leaders and different negotiators, and how as teachers, how we identify that and then not stop it because actually it looks more like or dangerous, or and so those are, on a practical level, I think those are things that teachers constantly struggle with, trying to gauge what is appropriate play and trying to draw out, I don't know, so what might you say to teachers? You know, I'm thinking about myself going back into those situations, and what are some of those key messages for teachers to be looking for, or you know, it's those tensions and values and belief systems that you have by yourself that you think what's right and what's not.
Well, I would say that nobody can stop people from playing, and the new paper that Jane and I were working on is about the moments when nobody's watching, when the footlights are off, when people find these moments and create them, whether they are appropriate or not. I think the teachers have to recognize the right of people to play with each other, not for the audience, not for appropriateness, but for each other. And as soon as they are aware of the audience, everything will be changed. They may suppress anything that we know that teachers don't know everything about children in school, and the more restrictive they are, the less they will see.
So then how do you deal with a situation that was overtly racist?
How do you deal with that?
A situation of play that was overtly racist. Like,
that's a very, very interesting question. I don't think that you can deal with it directly, because as soon as you start taking that as an issue, it's not anymore play, and it starts to, like, it will take it out of play. Whether the children will continue to play or not racist, I think that will speak more about what their concerns are, positive or negative. If you want to become part of a player, if it's possible for an adult to be an equal player, but then be ready to accept racism too, because that's part of the play. And if you want the children to test their ideas and beliefs and positions about racism through play, then you're instrumentally using play for some other purposes, because play is not by itself for that. But you could use that. Teachers use that all the time. The question is how much then it retains the quality of play, and how much it becomes like, okay, they'll just tell us more about that. Right. I don't know if you can always, people will be playful behind the back of everyone. Yeah.
And I was just going to pick up on that. One of the things you said really at the beginning was that they're all real. So the idea, because there's a prejudice against play, that it's not real, it's frivolous, it's a waste of time. We could be doing other productive things, just pretending and so on. Whereas, I mean, your illustrations all the way through seem it is real. So what's happening in is another issue, but it's certainly not. It's not that we could be doing something else. This in itself is productive. So the other thing I was thinking about the question about overt racism, that shift in and out of are we playing, are we not playing, and especially if you're the audience and you're watching that, we're agents as well. We can talk about what the play is about, right? Because it's another reality. It's the reality that we live by, whereas the reality in whatever that play world that you've stepped into, the rules are different in there. So, but you can't. It's what you said about it. You can't judge it. You have to judge it from the player's point of view as to what's happening inside that world. So you can,
I think teachers can learn a lot about what the children's concerns or likes or dislikes are, and how they will then intervene is a different matter. But they can learn about what's going on about their children that they are having in the class by observing a lot of what's going on in play. They will stop it right away if they will stop play. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you shouldn't stop play, because your concerns about racism may be very important, and the children should maybe know about that. But then it's not play anymore. So because it has a different purpose, and nobody says that you shouldn't disturb play. Play is usually disturbed, and I think that in our kind of Western European societies and the societies where children are segregated from people's adults' lives and production, play is seen as this time that, and children play in a different way. While in many societies where children were part of the life of the community of adults, everybody plays, including adults, and the play moments happen in between and through various chores. They're not having separate time to play.
And William's cousin Haley talks about episodes of play and how she then stores up some possible conversations she might have later in another time. But she doesn't have it then. She's
right. And we know, I didn't mention people who wrote about play, like Vivian Paley, especially trying to intervene through children's play, like Vivian Paley's book, You Can't Say You Can't Play, where she wanted to make sure that children are not excluded, that everybody who is there has to play. In a sense, is really trumping over children's sense of creating this community of players, because children themselves say, like, then what's the point? That's their answer. What's the point then, if everybody can play? Or they find some other subversive way. They give players who are forced on them roles in play that are insignificant, or just paralyze them. Another story from Helen Schwartzman is about this little boy who wanted to play. He was a newcomer, not speaking English, speaking mostly Spanish, and children didn't want to play with him, and the teacher said, you have to include him. And then the girl who was the organizer, the play boss, says, oh, okay, you'll be the goldfish. What do you do there? Stand like so they find ways to subvert those intrusions.
The other thing we know too is that play changes often from some of the literature. Play changes when the teacher's present, whether they're lurking or actually in the play. What constitutes play when the footlights are off, as we're describing, seems to me to be quite a different phenomenon altogether.
Right.
Perhaps we actually shouldn't be trying to analyse.
Right. Maybe we can't even know what it really represents for the children in that moment. But it may look to us as play and be something completely different. I have another little episode that Jane likes, that one of my earliest memories of play in the daycare center when I was maybe like 3 or 4 was going under the piano with the little boy and kissing each other. I don't know if it was play or not, but the teacher told my mother that we are playing husband and wife. So, because it's that it is and it isn't, it's real, it's not real, anything can happen, and children themselves or adults themselves can have at the same time 2 interpretations, and then who is the audience to say what it really is? It's very hard to say. Sometimes it's clear, like you can say chess play is play, you can say a soccer play is play, because they have a beginning and the end and specially defined rules, and we can see them as a kind of like, but these kinds of elusive moments or a pretend play that can be started sometimes going on over many days and sometimes just a little bit, it's very hard to catch that. Or to not only catch that, to notice it. And when we interpret it as play, we have to always have a bracket around there, so maybe.
Maybe we have to think about play as a mode of action, in terms of, I actually work in schools and leisure studies, and so for me, play is actually a way to actually manage my work. So I play to actually make my work enjoyable or pleasurable, or I've got a farm and I've got physical chores to do. So I will create a game, I will play to actually make it not hard physical labour and a yucky chore that I don't want to do. So for me, I'm really fascinated with your word postupoks, because that to me is actually possibly more the meaning of play from my perspective than trying to actually interpret it. I think of, for us to experience leisure, I can't think of anybody here that won't have sat there at some stage at home and wondered about what they would do when they won lotto. Now that's play, from my perspective. So, yeah, and I think, basically, why play is such an enigma for many adults is we've forgotten that we actually can play. Like, it's take a baby and put it in water and it will swim before it has any cognition. And we unlearn it to swim. So we have to then reteach it to swim. Maybe we have to just reteach adults how to play.
No, many traditional games that are passed down used to be at one point of time just joint games that adults can play together, and now they're just for children.
It's kind of what we're exploring, isn't it, around these ideas of being from a Bakhtinian sense. Is a multiplicity of being, so it's not just a being for me in this one moment in time as one individual, but I will be in this moment in time different to what I will be maybe in 10 minutes, or when I'm with a different audience, or when I'm with a different community of players. And then there's this idea about becoming that Bakhtin brings to us, this idea of ideological becoming, and the role of play in that. It's kind of some of the thinking we've been doing. Not in the sense of being is fixed, it's that fixedness that we're trying to resist here with play, which we often see in assessment records, or somebody is such and such. I read something the other day where somebody was describing a child as an explorer, or, does that mean that they're an explorer now, or what was their purpose for being an explorer? To whom were they exploring? What was the relationship? How did that event, their meaning, for that person in that moment with that community. And therefore it changes. And it's that ambivalence and uncertainty that makes it so ungraspable in a sense, isn't it? It's been one of our biggest challenges.
Right.
Kia ora katoa. Tēnā koe ana. I've been asked to thank you very much.
Thank you.
It seems to me that your use of Bakhtinian has been incredibly useful because it's made play much more complex than we have been seeing it through some of the traditional pedagogical eyes. I particularly like the way you were able to bring your wider family into your examples as well, and be able to look at them through the various chronotypes of Bakhtinian to see a range of interaction and relationships that were happening there. And it seems to me that some of those things that you've been discussing about the role of play has been equally, as people have been saying here, about the role of adults in play, and particularly teachers in play. And I think in New Zealand we tend to be very interventionist, that's my view. I remember going to see the forest kindergartens in Germany where the teachers tended to stay back. And even if there was an example of what looked quite dangerous to play, they sort of watched. Whereas we seem to think that we need to get in there and make sure that things are safe. And I think that your examples of evil play and gender play and race play means that children have to be able to explore it through their own abilities without too many interactions with adults judging their play. So thank you very much, and I'd like to present you with a small gift.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to seeing you further in the...
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being such a wonderful audience and coming to listen to my ranting about play, which is half-baked, and it will always be half-baked. Thank you.
Okay. So as I said, if you would like to join us at Iguana on Victoria Street, we're going to head over there fairly soon for a 7:45 start eat. Otherwise, if you're significantly tantalised, Anna is speaking at the Bakhtinian conference starting on Wednesday right through to over the weekend. If anybody's really interested, please feel free to email me. I'm sure we could squeeze you in. I could send you the program. We've got lots and lots of dialogues of this ilk and more.
You can also mention this if you want to. I forgot all of that.
Do you want to mention
Okay,
that?
so mostly what I presented was written in this article that's in this book, Bakhtinian Pedagogy. That's mostly from that article. Some things that I didn't mention here but go along these lines is also an article in this book about Vygotsky creativity, which I also co-edited with two other colleagues. And then I have a small response to Jane's conceptualization of the chronotype in play in this Journal of Knowledge and Cultures. So if anybody's interested, I can send references to those.
So maybe if we put your email up on the whiteboard, Anna,
okay.
people could get in touch if they can't come to the
Right,
conference.
that would be very good.
So thank you very much everybody for coming, and thank you to the Early Youth Centre for hosting this event, I should say. Thank you.
This is still recording in some way.
Turn it off now.
So like this. Oh, okay.